Palestinians in Kafr Malik hold funerals for 3 of their own on Thursday, a day after Jewish settlers attacked the West Bank village in their dozens as the residents tried to defend themselves. As the cleanup continued, they say they were taken by surprise.
No fewer than 70 to 80 settlers took part. They entered the area and scattered among most of the houses within 5 minutes. At first, they started with the car, broke the windows and then burned it. A settler came to the house here. The window shutter was open, he broke the glass and threw a firebomb. There was a 1-month-old baby girl sleeping in the bed.
Last week, more than 100 Israeli settlers launched a violent attack on Palestinians in the West Bank in the town of Kafr Malik, setting property on fire and even shooting at Palestinians who tried to stop them from doing so. Now, right-wing Israeli violence in the West Bank has gone so far that they have even begun attacking Israeli security forces in the area. And before we get to all the details about that unbelievable twist, we do have to start with the settlers' horrific attack on this town where at least 7 illegal settler outposts have gone up in recent months. And I just want to remind you all that the Israeli government even announced some months ago, I think it was last month, that they intend on building 22 new illegal settlements in the West Bank. So we shouldn't be surprised by any of this. This was already pre-announced. This is a plan that's been in the works. They're going to annex the entirety of the West Bank. That's what they plan to do.
That's Miriam Adelson's plan. She's the one that bribed Donald Trump. Her family's bribed him, giving campaign contributions of $337 million. So That's how bribery works in America. I'm gonna go off on the settlers in a second, who are pretty much the worst people on earth.
They are.
Okay,
yes. So let's get to some of these details. So dozens of Israelis descended on this village near Ramallah by foot and in vehicles. The attackers hurled Molotov cocktails and set homes and cars on fire. They allegedly tried to break into people's homes. I don't even want to say allegedly because there's plenty.
No, there's
video
right
evidence of it,
yeah.
right? A firebomb was thrown into a bedroom where a newborn was being put to sleep. Luckily, the mom and baby survived that attack. And soon after the attack began, Israeli forces arrived and opened fire at Palestinians instead of going after the rioters, the settlers. They accused villagers of shooting at them, which no witnesses corroborated. Very likely because it's untrue. And the soldiers killed 3 people, according to the Palestinians. The Palestinian Health Ministry. A 35-year-old, an 18-year-old, and a 15-year-old. Now remember, we're talking about the West Bank. We're not talking about Gaza here. So the West Bank was not governed by Hamas. So you can't argue that Hamas is using people as human shields in this case. But the fact that any of these terrorists were held even slightly accountable infuriated the settlers. And so they set off a chain of confrontations between them and Israeli security forces in the area. Soldiers shot and wounded an Israeli teenager on Friday during a clash with the settlers. So let's get into those details in just a minute. First, brief comment from Cenk.
Yeah, so I was debating an Israeli supporter on a program called Counterpoints earlier today. And he started describing this apocalyptic religious zealots who wouldn't hesitate to kill civilians. And I'm like, you mean Israeli settlers? Because he was talking about theoretically the Iranian regime, but Iran is not starting wars, Israel's starting wars. So, but it's always projection. So these settlers are nuts. They're religious zealots and they think that God gave them that land, so they get to murder the Palestinians on the land to take it because God whispered in their ear about how they murder, 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 and it's okay, God's on your side. And they're just Palestinians, murder their babies. They're terrorists. And they came in to steal the land in the first place. And they say, no, we're not stealing it because it's Judea and Samaria. Anyone who says Judea and Samaria is basically saying, I'm a terrorist who'd like to steal Palestinian land. And I don't mind murdering Palestinians to do it. Because there is no other explanation for, hey, the entire international community says West Bank and Gaza Strip should be part of a 2-state solution and become independent Palestine. And the settlers go, no, I want the land because my murderous God in their fantasies said that I should murder the Muslims and take their land.
But by the way,
you're a religious zealot lunatics. So I'm not interested, like in the old days, you couldn't even say like things that are factual about the settlers because people would be like, anti-Semite, of course they get to murder Muslims. Of course they do. No, they don't. They're the bigots. They're nuts. They're lunatics.
Yeah.
And so they cause more war, more problems, more deaths than almost anyone on the planet. So get real about who the frickin' settlers are, some of the worst people on earth.
So this past Sunday, as the Associated Press reports, dozens of Israeli settlers rioted around a military base in the Israeli-occupied West Bank, setting fires, vandalizing military vehicles, spraying graffiti, and attacking soldiers. Again, we're talking about Israeli on Israeli violence here. We're talking about settlers attacking, Israeli security forces. The Israeli military said that the infrastructure burned in the attack included systems that help thwart terrorist attacks and maintain security.
The only terrorists in the West Bank are the settlers. Okay, so let's get real about who the terrorists are. And you understand why they're rioting against the IDF? Because the IDF showed up and only murdered 3 innocent Palestinians. They were trying to burn the whole village down.
That's exactly right, yes.
And then they're like, what are you stopping us for? We were gonna murder all of them.
But by the way, IDF has been providing cover for the crimes committed by these settlers for how many years?
Endlessly.
For how many years? So you've created a monster. Now revel in it, enjoy. This is what you have enabled. You just thought that it would never turn around and impact the IDF or Israeli security forces. They were just under the assumption that the only people who would be terrorized, the only people who would be run out of their own homes would be Palestinians. And by the way, there are also, Christians living in the occupied West Bank as well who also get terrorized by these people. But they were under the assumption those are the only people who are gonna be victimized. We don't have to worry about any Israeli dealing with these unhinged terrorists who have been raining terror on people living in the West Bank for many years now.
One quick point. So Bethlehem is the home of Jesus, of course, and Christians live there. There's a church there. That church has been attacked before by settlers. And so they're not just attacking Muslims. They're saying Judea and Samaria, God told us, is Jewish settler land, and you Christians need to get out of here. You Muslims need to get out of here, otherwise we're gonna kill you all on behalf of our God. I mean, there isn't any bigger terrorists in the world than those Israeli settlers who are constantly attacking Christian and Muslim Palestinians because they think God told them to steal their land.
So look, 6 suspects were allegedly apprehended and then transferred to the police in Israel. But this is my favorite part. Settlers were even caught on tape accusing the IDF of being Hamas. Let's watch. You guys eventually are gonna have to find a new scapegoat. Like blaming Hamas for everything is kind of amazing.
No,
it's
that was
kind
perfect.
of amazing.
That was
like,
perfect.
wow.
No, I love that video. Good, attack each other more. Like 2 of the worst forces on earth. And the settlers somehow miraculously worse than the IDF, right? And to the settlers, they're such lunatics. They think the IDF is Hamas.
It's amazing, it really is.
When your propaganda has gone too far is when you think the IDF is Hamas. And let me guess, the IDF is anti-Semitic, right? Okay, look, I hope they do a 2-state solution, and this is the one time I'll cheer for the IDF. By the way, if Israel becomes a safe haven for Jews who have 2-state solution, they don't attack anyone anymore and stop taking land, then I'll be super happy with the IDF, right? Okay, but the one time I'll cheer for them is if they do a 2-state solution and they grab those settlers and then drag them back into Israel. That is going to be a beautiful thing to see.
Yeah,
I can't wait for that. I don't know that I'll ever see it in my lifetime.
You won't. So look, Netanyahu and
because by the way, the Israeli government supports terrorists. That's why I'm not going to see it in my lifetime. That's why they keep encouraging them by giving them 22 new settlements because they love terrorists as long as they're murdering Muslims and Christians.
Remember, the IDF in the West Bank is there to protect the settlers as they are running Palestinians out of their homes, as they're burning villages. That's typically what happens. Now look, Netanyahu and even Itamar Ben-Gvir, a convicted terrorist, literally, publicly claimed to condemn the settler attacks on the IDF, likely because attacks on IDF soldiers, Haaretz West Bank correspondent Hagar Shezaf said, are obviously always controversial in Israeli society, but attacking Palestinians, not so controversial anymore. Opposition leader,
like it was ever.
It never was.
Please,
Let's just be clear about that. Opposition leader Yair Lapid told Israel's army radio that the riots were carried out by Jewish terrorists, gangs of criminals who feel backed by the governing coalition, because they've been backed by the governing coalition. Let's be real about that.
You know what? Look, we're experiencing this a little bit. My family members are in Turkey, okay? Because Erdogan started letting in a lot more Muslim fundamentalists from Afghanistan, from Syria, from other places. And what it's doing is, Turkey's a very secular country, so it's starting this huge conflict within the country. Not starting, it's been now for a while. And so the secular group feels impinged upon by the fundamentalists. And the fundamentalists are like, what do you mean? God told us X, Y, Z. Well, fundamentalists from every religion believe that the God whispered in their ear that they're the Baghdadis, right? And everybody else is inferior to them and should serve them, right? So now Israel, you're not getting it. If you're a secular person in Israel, a citizen, you think they're just gonna stop at the Palestinians? No, fundamentalists are nuts. They're gonna come for you next. That's why they're calling the IDF Hamas. You think that once they get to be the majority, and yes, fundamentalists in all the different religions have more kids, okay? Once they get to be the majority in Israel, if you think Israel's bad now, and if you think Israel's bad for Palestinians, no, it's gonna be terrible for secular Jews in Israel. Terrible. You think these guys won't rip you apart and call you Hamas? All right, wait for it.
Yeah, well, enjoy the monster that you've nurtured. Now, Israeli law enforcement rarely holds settlers accountable for their criminal behavior. And that's why we have arrived at the day that you see the settlers attacking IDF soldiers. Now, Yesh Din, an Israeli rights group that examined more than 1,600 cases of settler violence in the West Bank between 2005 and 2023, found that just 3% ended in a conviction. And finally, settler attacks injured more than 220 Palestinians during the first 5 months of 2025, the highest rate in years, according to the United Nations. Settlers killed a Palestinian man on June 19th, the UN says. Hundreds of Palestinians, by the way, have been killed in the West Bank since the beginning of the genocide in Gaza. Starting in October of 2023. And so that's what we're dealing with here. These are unhinged lunatics who have been able to behave the way they've been behaving, violently, with impunity. And when you tell people engaging in bad behavior over and over again that it's totally fine, continue engaging in said bad behavior, don't be surprised when that bad behavior turns around and starts attacking you, because that's what's happening right now.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.